I wanted on this video to continue what we have been doing in the book of Job. We're in chapter 13, and I'm working from the Hebrew text, looking at the reading of the Hebrew, followed by a grammatical analysis, pretty much phrase by phrase, and a running commentary. So we worked our way up to chapter 13. And in this chapter, Job is going to criticize his friends as terrible advocates for God. They are physicians of no value, he will say, and only talk unrighteously for God. It is with God alone, then, that Job desires to speak. And so we begin with verse 1. It reads, Hein kol ra'ata eini, shama'a ozni v'tavin la. Behold, or lo, my eye has seen all of this that you're talking about. Ra'ata is the cow perfect third feminine singular from ra'a. Notice the ta here, the ending showing third feminine singular with the comments followed by the hey. And so my ear, shama'a ozni v'taven la. My ear has heard and has understood it. Shama'a is from shama, the cow perfect third feminine singular again from shama, going with ozen or ear. My ear has heard and understood it. But taven is from the root being, to understand. It is the cow imperfect. It has understood it, third feminine singular from being, middle weak verb, to understand. As we look at this verse, all the examples which so far has given about providence and the power of God, Job knows already, he's saying. This is evidence from what Job has just affirmed in chapter 12. Zophar is not the only one with a key into the revelation of God, is what Job is arguing or saying here. And so we move on to the next verse. Kedatechem yadati gam ani. As you know, as your knowledge, I also indeed know. Lo nofel anochi mikim. That is, I am not falling from you, or I'm not inferior, would be the idea, from you. Notice here, yadati is the cow perfect first common singular from yada, to know. Indeed, I know, and I am not falling from you, which is an idiomatic way of saying, I'm not behind you. I'm not inferior to you. From the root nafal, it's the cow participle masculine singular, or nominate, I should say, cow participle singular, masculine singular from nofel. And so in verse 3, having repeated verse 1 and 2, he then goes on, Ulam ani el Shaddai adaber. But indeed, I, unto Shaddai, I will speak. V'hohecha el hechpatz. And I desire unto God, I desire to reason, to be able to reason unto God. Notice adaber is from the root davar, to speak. It's a PL imperfect first common singular from dabar. Notice the chatef pathak followed by the pathak and the doubling of the middle radical, showing we're looking at a PL stem. And then I desire, echpatz is from chapatz, to desire. It's the cow imperfect first common singular from chapatz. Unto God indeed also to share my concern. Notice hochecha is the infinitive, hiphil infinitive absolute from yachach, to a reason. And so what he's saying here in verse 3 is Job is more convinced that his friends really have nothing of value to say to him. So he becomes more and more desperate in his search to find a way to plead his case before God. And you can see in other chapters a similar, other passages, a similar desire in 9:34 to 35 and 16 verse 2. So then we continue in the next verse. But indeed, the olam atem tofele shaker, but you are plasterers of lies. Rofa'e alil kulachem, all of you are physicians of no value. Notice, but indeed you are, tofele is from tafal, to smear. And we have a cow participle, masculine plural, from tafal. You are smearers of lies, or plasterers of lies. And rofa'e, you are physicians, alil, of no value, all of you, is Job's argument. Rofa'e is from rafa, to heal, and we have again a cow participle, a masculine plural, from rafa. So you are healers of no value, alil. It is interesting, what Job is really saying here is that what you have to give have no value whatsoever, is his point. And he's going to go on to simply say in this passage, you are twisting really the truth and are giving it a distorted picture with your lies. They are really, he says, only physicians or healers of no value. They can't even heal the problems in the universe. Now, no way can they heal Job's own problem. And so he's saying, you really are of no value to me with your advice, is what Job is saying. So then we move on. Verse 5. Mi yatain acharesh tacharishun utehilachem lechokma. Oh, that literally this is an idiom, mi yatain, who would give to you that you would be quiet, or oh, that you would altogether be silent and hold your peace. Notice, or would, we could probably render it, would you would you be altogether silent and simply hold your peace? Or oh, that you would do this. Notice yatain is from the root natan, the cow imperfect, third masculine singular from natan. Oh, that it would give for you, and it would be a blessing if you would just hold your peace. Ha-haresh, Job is arguing this. Ha-haresh, by the way, is from harash, to be silent. It is the Hifil infinitive absolute from harash, followed then by the Hifil imperfect second masculine plural in taharishun from harash. Notice the AI vowel pattern, thematic vowel pattern, indicative of a Hifil stem, that you would be altogether then silent. And it would be wisdom to you. Tehi lechem lechokmah. From tehi is from haya, the cow imperfect third feminine singular. It would be your wisdom if you would just hold your peace. So Job's friends, Job is saying, would be wiser if they would just keep silent. Their speaking only betrays their foolishness. And what is of little help to Job, he is saying. So then we move on to the next verses. Shem'una tohakti verivot shefatai hakshivu. Hakshivu. That is, hear now my reasoning, my argument. Let my argument be heard, and hearken or give attention to the pleadings of my lips. Shem'u is a cow imperative, masculine plural from shama. So hear now my reasoning, tohakti, and the pleadings of my lips, literally in the Hebrew, sefatai, hakshiva, hearken to or give attention to. Here we have a hifil imperative, masculine plural from kashav. Notice the hey prefix with the pathak followed by the hirik yod, the AI thematic vowel pattern. And so listen to what I am trying to say, is Job's point. And then he comes on in verse 7 to accuse them of speaking unrighteously for God. Haleel tidabru avla velo tidavru remiyah. Will you speak unrighteously or wrongly for God? For God? A question mark. Will you speak wrongly? And will you talk deceitfully for him? Here we have tedavru from davar. It is the PL imperfect, second person masculine plural from davar. So for God, will you speak avla, wrongly, and talk deceitfully for him? Below tidabru remiyah. Tidabru is from davar, to talk or to speak. It's a PL, again, imperfect, second masculine plural from davar. Notice in both of these, the shava pathat followed by the dogish in the second radical of the root indicates a PL stem. So what Job is saying here is, instead of speaking for God, Job rebukes his friends for speaking deceitfully for him. Their false accusations against Job were evidence to him that they were only speaking unrighteously for God. In other words, you're putting things into God's mouth that he never said. And that's, I think, a challenge all the time, not to do that. Well, we move on then to the next verse. Hafanav tesaun im la'el terivun. Will you lift up his face? Literally, his face, will you lift up? And it's another question, rhetorical question or a question. And then we have here the concept of lifting up a face by trying to secure favor. So will you lift up his face? Im la'el terivun, will you plead your case for God, even though you're really not doing it at all? And notice here, tisaun, to lift up, from nasa, it's the cow imperfect second person plural, masculine plural, from nasa, a pay noon verb where the noon by progressive assimilation has gone into the scene here. So his face will you lift up, or for God will you contend, from riv here, a cow imperfect second masculine plural from riv. And so his question is, or his point here, is that he's accusing his friends of attempting to vindicate God for their own personal reasons. Their use of wrong arguments cannot be looked upon favorably by God, even though they are trying to help him. It won't work, is what Job is saying. So we continue in verse 9. Atov ki yakor etchem im kehatel be'anosh teha telu vo. Would it be good that he would search you out? Would it not be good, is the idea, that he would search you out, or as one who mocks a man, will you go on mocking me? Notice here, Yachor is from Hakar, to search. It's the cow imperfect, third masculine singular from Hakar. Would it not be good that he would search you out as one mocks a man? Kehatel is from the root talal. It's a hifil infinitive construct preceded by the inseparable preposition ke, as the mocking against a man. Will you mock him? Tehatelu is the hifil imperative, or imperfect, hifil imperfect, second masculine singular from talal. In other words, will you cause to mock him, is the thought here. And as we look at the meaning of verse 9, when God examines, Job is saying, your faulty arguments, will the result be good, or will his hand be against you? Job warns his friends that they cannot deceive God. God will see through their insincerity and their false arguments that they are presenting. And so in verse 10, it reads, Hochicha yochicha etchem, im baseter panim tisaun. In other words, he will indeed reprove you if in secret you show favor. You are lifting up a face, namely his face. Here we have Hochecha is the Hifil infinitive absolute from Yachach, and Yochicha is your Hifil imperfect third masculine singular from Yachach. Historically, a Pei Vav root, Bachach, changing in the Hifil, Yah Hicha to Yochicha. So he will surely indeed reprove you if in secret you are showing favor, lifting up face again. Tisaun is from Nasa. It's the cow imperfect second masculine plural from Nasa. And so his point here is that he shows his friends what the result will be when God investigates their false arguments. He will surely reprove them for their partiality and for making false testimony in his name. And by the way, this is further than developed in Job in chapter 42, verses 7 and following. And then in verse 11, the text continues, Halo se'eto teva'et etchem, ufachto yipol alechem. Shall not his majesty then terrify you, and his dread shall fall upon you because of what you're doing and manufacturing these false charges in his name? Teva 8 is the PL, means to terrify. Shall not his majesty, shall it not terrify you? A PL imperfect third feminine singular from ba'at, to terrify. And his dread, shall it not understood fall upon you? Yipol from nafal, to fall, a cow imperfect third masculine singular. And so what Job is arguing here, God does not need the sayings of men to make him wise. He knows everything. He is capable of defending himself without anyone's help. So Job feels that his friends should be afraid of their limited knowledge. They have tried to defend God, and they have done so wrongly, in a wrong way. As a result, his majesty and terror shall terrify them when God comes to judge them. And then as we move to the next verse, which brings us to the conclusion of this first part of chapter 13, where Job is critiquing his friends and their false effort to speak for God. So verse 12 reads, Zikronechem mishle efer, legave chomer gavechem. Your memorials are like parables of ashes. The way I would render this, your bulwark mounds of argument that you're giving are really of clay. That's what your bulwarks or your bulwarks, like your mound of arguments, are like. So zikre, notice zikro nechem, your memorial, your memorable sayings, we could render it, are like parables of ashes. They are fruitless. And then this is interesting here. Your legave homer. Gave is like a, a mound or a bulwark. And so I think the thought would be your bulwark or your mounds, homer, of clay, uh, or two mounds of clay are your bulwarks, your arguments, gavehim. And this is a very interesting conclusion as he's speaking of their arguments. Your epigrams, your proverbial statements that you use to express your ideas are as fragile and worthless as ashes, as clay. Their shield, or their so-called defense of God, is made of clay earthenware and is of no defense whatsoever. So all of their defended views, sayings, are fragile, worthless defense against the Almighty, who will expose them in his judgment someday. And so I'm going to stop there. Job will go on, and as we're trying to work our way through this, and we'll talk in the next verses of chapter 13 about wanting to speak to God. Again, going back to his desire, moving from his friends, he's going to turn to God and speak to him. So let me stop there. One of the things I think we can learn from this text is that we have to be careful when we try to think we're defining what God is up to. When people suffer, sometimes it's very prone for people to say, well, you must have done something wrong, and that's why it's happening. And that's why the book of Job is being written, to critique that idea. And this chapter certainly gives a strong warning, in a sense, as the author of Job is writing these words. Let me just stop there and we'll pick it up. We'll keep trying to work our way through this marvelous book. I mean, it's wonderful, the book of Job.